hello everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to May's speaker series with our two speakers right here. For those that are not familiar with the speaker series, which I'm assuming most of you are, because we were here last month, the Ergo Speaker Series is a monthly event where founders and leaders share advice on how they overcame challenges, capitalize on their target market, and develop their product, providing you with actionable insight for your own products and processes. For more information, you can find us on Facebook or online at centrallane.org and digitalizing.org under our Speaker Series tab. I'd like to thank our sponsors for this evening's conversation. This free event is presented by Deerville Labs and is sponsored by CDI, Valley Beverage, Thomas College's Harold Alpine Institute for Business Innovation, and Rick's Co-working and Innovation Space. In addition, this conversation is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on our YouTube channel. So to introduce this evening's wonderful speakers, I would like to introduce Chuck Donald, who's the co-founder and CEO, and Julie Morrison, who's the co-founder and president of RockStep Solutions. And they will be speaking about how RockStep is transforming and digitizing in vivo drug discovery, improving laboratory workflows, and helping vaccines get to market faster. And for those that are not familiar with RockStep Solutions is a Portland Maine-based biomedical research company that works with scientists, academia, and nonprofits to aggregate data for on-demand access. And without further ado, I'll let you guys get going.
All right. Well, thanks, Sabrina. I guess I'll just kick it off here, get it started. So I'm Chuck Donnelly, and we are in Portland, Maine, our business. And just a little background about me, and then I'll let you can give a little background about you. Prior to co-founding RockStep, I was director of computational sciences at the Jackson Laboratory. So that was kind of where I got the sort of the knowledge and the credentials, if you will, to get the company started. And prior to that, I was in the space astrophysics group at UC Berkeley working on space stuff. So yeah, I worked on ground controlled space shuttle and all kinds of orbiting systems and stuff like that. So really cool stuff. And yeah.
I'm Julie Morrison, president and co-founder. I came in 2016. We'll talk about that and how to find co-founders. And my background is in microbiology. And I, oddly enough, did my internship at the Jet Propulsion Lab, developing biosensors to send up in space to detect spores. So Chuck and I both bonded over our totally irrelevant space background for what we're doing now.
Right. Just saying, Maine is the center of aerospace. It's the same.
There you go. So I had been in the lab in the research laboratories for a while. I stepped aside and was doing some entrepreneurial things in the community. And then Don Gooding happened, said, a friend of Don Gooding, who was the executive director of MSET at the time, knew Chuck. A friend knew me and said, I think you guys should talk. And Chuck was like, I have no money, but like, I don't know if I can pay payroll next week, but I'll talk to her. And I had been out of the lab maybe 5-6 years or more by then. And I was shocked that people were still collecting their data on spreadsheets and in paper. I thought certainly things had changed since I had been in the lab, and no, nothing had changed. So I was really compelled to help solve this issue. And so from there, we'll tell you a little bit more about that history and journey when we get into the deck.
Yeah, very cool. So yeah, it was actually a really awkward interview when I first met Julie because I didn't have any money. Somebody must have told you I didn't have anything to pay, but I was like interviewing her and I said, wow, this would be really great. Let's talk salary.
So that NIH grant's coming any day now, right?
Yeah.
You guys know how that goes.
All right, so let's go to the next slide here. And
Sorry.
that's all right. Maybe there's only one slide.
Well,
Oh, you were in the. Technology.
Oh, I can give the intro. So we're going to do like a little bit of history of RockStep, like what our journey looked like to give some perspective. It's been 6 years since I started the company, or I joined the company, a few more years from that since Chuck had the idea. And so we're going to do a little bit of history and kind of our journey and some of many of the hiccups along the way. I think every day feels existential. And then we're going to turn towards some of the things that we found most challenging, but really important to do, and some of the advice along the way. So please feel free to ask any questions.
Yeah, and it's really exciting to be here because we've been at this now a number of years and been through several accelerators over that time, been where you guys are trying to figure out the business and stuff like that. It's kind of cool to be able to feed back. Right now we have about 35 people in the company. 25 of them are full-time FTEs. Actually, we have another person starting on Monday. I always have to think about like what day it is to figure out how many people we have. And then we have about 10 or so contractors. And so our product, so this slide kind of gets us started, what we do. And this sentence here took us probably 3 years because people would ask me, what do you guys do? And I'd launch in an hour later, everybody be asleep, and I'd be still talking about it. And really all I needed to do is say, Climb is a SaaS collaboration platform for managing in vivo operations and data. And that's really all I was saying.
Day-long workshops over and over again for like over the course of 3 years to get to that. It's like I have never felt someone so much when you were like, I don't really know where we fit. I was like, yes. Like figuring out our product market fit was really difficult.
Right. Yeah. So that's really, that's the core of it. And that's why all these little 5-minute pitches are really important, because like I came from academia where you talk an hour and your goal was to put everybody to sleep, and investors don't like that. Next slide. So basically, what we do is we're in the drug discovery, drug development space. And it's a long, long process, takes 10 to 15 years to get through a single drug to market, takes $2.5 billion. And we found our niche right here in this space called in vivo. And Julie will talk a little bit more about that because we didn't really know where we fit very well. It took us a long time to figure that out as well. Next slide. Do you want to talk about this too?
Yeah, so our product Climb, as Chuck said, is a SaaS collaboration platform, totally built and hosted from the Azure cloud. So that proved to be really, really important to be cloud native in our industry, because the big biopharma and the CROs, the contract research organizations, are all going through these big transformations where they're moving everything to the cloud. 5 years ago, they were starting to talk about it, but we were getting more barriers. And now we're not even going to talk to you. So we built it from the ground up in the cloud. And what it really does is on the right-hand side, you can see the different personas. So really important always to know who's using your product. And then with the functionality on the left. So really from the time, right, so you have a compound or a molecule. Actually, they probably have 10,000 or more compounds or molecules. And those have to all be tested. And then you get down to a few and you think they might work. And at this point in time, we still have to test those in animals before they can be tested in humans. So from the moment that animal enters someone's facility, through the veterinary care, tracking of that, ensuring that the proper welfare and procedures and enrichment for those animals are cared for, all the way through the scientists then designing the studies they want to do, assigning, scheduling, randomizing the animals, all of the science that has to be done for these drugs, all the way through the data collection and aggregation is all done in Climb. And so that's amazing, because it's really the entire animal's life cycle. But because of that, we didn't fit into any of the current market products. So we'll talk about that, but people would say, are you a lab notebook? Well, no, we do most of it, but not this. Well, are you this big like management system? Well, no. So it was really difficult to kind of figure out where that fit into the current market, because it was kind of novel to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, just to follow the cloud thing. When we started this, the pharmaceutical industry was very risk averse. They are very risk averse, and the cloud was very much a risk, and they didn't want to have much to do with us. But you find a parade and you get out in front of it, people say, and I feel like we stuck with the cloud. We knew it's coming. We know it's coming. We know it's coming. We were marching in front of it, and now we are first movers in that space. Next slide.
And we'll talk more about this, but our MVP was really tested in academia, for better or for worse. It was great in a lot of ways, but it also hindered us being able to figure out our market fit for a long time too.
And we will. And so our journey here, next slide. So basically, you know, you guys all are doing this, right? You know, you're imagining a different future, how you're going to change the world. And that was where we were back in, next slide, 2013, 2014, way back when. Here we are 9 years from when I started first thinking about that to now. And, you know, it says 9 lives, but, you know, literally near-death experiences like every week, you know, for 9 years.
Just
Maybe
as
not,
a total like tangent, write these things down, because every now and then we'll be like, we should put this in our book. But you know what? Things happen so often that I will not remember. Like, I remember the day where payroll was going to be cut in 2 hours and the investor check went to the wrong address. And we were going, we're not like Bangor Savings is running payroll. Like we have 1 hour and 45 minutes and they're running payroll. And we're like chasing this person down to get to the bank. Like, I can't tell you how many times that's happened over the years. Like,
Yep. Next slide. So in basically the ideation phase, you know, 2013, 2014, this is when I was still at Jackson Laboratory, and I was feeling like there needed to be, the whole world was going through a lot of transformations then, especially at Jackson. A new director, I would have been director of computational sciences, but they brought in a new lab director. NIH's priorities were changing. So I thought, well, I'm gonna not get swept out by the changes. I'm gonna lead the changes. So I started thinking about what can I do to be innovative. So basically spent a lot of time early on just thinking of innovative ideas, technology, research, looking at different things, the cloud, and had an early team of founders and trying to figure out if we're ready. But then finally had an idea and wrote a grant. And that was the grant to NIH. Now I had a lot of experience writing grants as director of computational science at JAX. So I've been funded by NIH. So it was not, I mean, it's a high bar to write a grant anytime and get it funded. But I knew basically what I was doing. And I also had some really good support from MTI, Joanne Goodnight. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of her, but she's really awesome. So she worked really closely with us, and Karen West. Next slide. And so in 2015, we got the grant. So basically wrote this grant, submitted it, and then kind of forgot about it. And then the phone rang and they said, you're going to get funded. And so I had to quit my job. I was director of computational science at JAX. I was making real money and had a real job. And then all of a sudden, okay, I'm going to quit my job and basically make nothing and try to start a business. And so, you know, you'll see this quote later on, but basically at this point, you're jumping off a cliff and you're trying to assemble the airplane on the way down. And that's what I did. And so with that early financing from NIH, SBIR, prototype developed, early business plans, got the NIH funding and MTI funding, and had a great business partnership with the University of California, San Francisco, which is still one of our key partners today. So UCSF is huge for us right now. And they started with us back in 2015 when I had an idea and a smile and not much else and a prototype. And so we started getting some early adopters through that. Next slide. So this is really the core period for us. And this is when I realized that, you know, I can't do this alone. The people I started the company with, it probably wasn't going to be a long-term thing. I don't think anybody, you know, if you're not ready for a startup, it's brutal. Be ready for it. It's not, you know, we're going on 9 years from 2013 to today, you know, and really started in 2015. So 8 years, and you've been in, well, 7 years, and Julie's been at it for 6 years with me. But anyway, so this was really the key period trying to find product market fit. Met Julie, we hit it off, and she became sort of a co-founder at that point and has now moved up to be president of the company. And wrote another SBIR grant, got another total 1.85 million from NIH, industry partners. And you want to talk about, so in this period, really, this was the crucial period for us because, you know, to be honest with you, we didn't really know where our product fit in the market. We had a product, we knew it did something important. In academia, we knew how it fit in academia, but we didn't know how it fit in the industry because I didn't come from the pharmaceutical industry, and be honest with you, that's where they keep the money. Academia is so price sensitive that, you know, you really aren't going to make a living in academia. Julie enters.
Yeah. So as you do when you have your first Lighthouse customer, they direct everything and you cater to them because everything has got to be for them. So we launched at UCSF in October of 2016. I, having never been in an vivo lab, went to one of our main conferences in October. One morning we wake up at the conference floor and the front screen of the app is gibberish. It's in like weird backend code, right? It's just not working. And UCSF is coming online in like 2 hours. We know that they come in at 6 a.m. their time. And we're like, so it's just a panic, right? You're like calling in, you've got the one developer, like, who can fix it? This is like, I'm on the conference floor, first of all, like, and now we've got this customer more likely, who is our only Lighthouse customer at this point, Nobel laureates lab. You have to make them happy. And there were just all these little buggy things in there. And so I remember I walked back into Chuck's office after, and I sat down and I said, I'm not selling this anymore. This is not ready. We're done. Like, we need to go out and talk to more people and figure out how to make this better. And that really probably was the start. I didn't realize it at the time, was probably the start of my obsession with user experience. So like, I think my team will like engrave on my tombstone, oh, you want to develop that? Did you talk to a customer about it? Like, every time, did you talk to someone about it? So that's really where we start. Who do we start talking to? So we did a lot of academic research because we had friends and family. And then we were able to, so UCSF is a little bit of a interesting group because they were also, they do a lot of research for pharmaceutical companies as well. So they were able to give us some of that insight. And through that, we were able to find some contacts and partner with Novartis, so the NIBR group in Cambridge, and another big public biotech in San Francisco. And part of that, they just said, we know what we want, and we've gone through 20-something vendors, and you're the only people that would actually sit and talk to us and not just dictate the sales cycle and rush us along. Like, we're looking for partners. I think that was really the beginning of our journey, is our customers are our partners. And everyone kept telling us that's not scalable, but so far we've been able to scale that. And that's one of the things that differentiates us. So we launched into probably 2 years from that point of, weekly meetings down in Cambridge with Novartis, mapping out their process in San Francisco at least once a month in their vivariums and their animal rooms, watching them. What does it look like? Oh, right. So when you say, like, a developer says to you, well, why can't they just do it this way? Well, because they have 2 pairs of gloves on and a hood. Like, before masking was cool, right? They had masking on, 2 pairs of gloves, a syringe in one hand, an animal in another hand, and, a scale over here. Yeah, okay, that's why they need it to be hands-free, right? So you can get that context by seeing them. So we really launched into 2 years of certainly developing along that time, but getting to where we needed to be so that we could get into the industry. And that was like a tumultuous time of that one sentence you guys saw, like, what are we actually doing? And I feel like that period of user research and really iterative feedback, like every week it was, here's a new mock-up. What do you guys think? Here's how it's going to work. Okay, let's redo it. Hand in hand with the customers, hand in hand the whole time. That's what helped us find our product market fit.
Yeah, and we were fortunate that we had the funding from NIH to get us through this period, and we brought in some investors as well, some small amounts of money from investors. But that was sort of how we were able to span that time. One of the moats, if you will, that we have, that doesn't allow people to easily compete with us, is that it takes years to actually build. The software is so sophisticated, so complex, and the processes are so complex that we are now the world's leader with this kind of software. There is another company that's kind of chasing us. They're in our rearview mirror, but we're leading the way. So yeah, that period of time, and I can't stress enough, we didn't know our customer. We didn't know where we fit. And Julie spent 2 years trying to figure that out.
We knew we wanted to be in big pharma. we knew we wanted to be in the contract research organizations, which does work for big pharma and the biotechs, but we would get, someone would call someone on our board, right, who was the former CEO or CIO of Novartis. He'd call back, I've got this friend who really wants to see your software. And we'd get down there to Boston and they'd be doing like cellular imaging or something, like nothing to do with animal work. And that just happens so often. Like friends and family would call, oh, I want you to show it to so-and-so. And it's like, well, we really need money. So do we pivot and try to do this thing that we're not necessarily the best at? Because we need money. We need to stay afloat, right? So you're constantly chasing that. And we even had a company in Maine that worked with fish, and we worked with them for a while to, can we kind of adapt it a little bit for their work? And yes, but was that really our focus? So, say we had some cannabis options for our software, and genotype is a genotype, right? So, but again, like you can go off on all these branches because they're, when you need money and you need to make payroll, these all look really exciting, but had we not stayed the course, we would not be where we were today.
So next slide. So we, in 2020, after 2+ years of Julie's work, this was another huge near-death experience.
In April.
Yeah, so we had investors lined up. We were probably a week away from closing investment. We had customers that were ready to buy the software before they even saw it because they knew what we could do. We're getting ready to release it, and then you know what happened, right? In March, and everything vanished. The investors all ran away.
It was a public company.
Yeah.
Lost a third of their shares overnight, or a third of their valuation overnight, and they called and said paperwork's not coming.
Right. Everything, and customers started closing down their vivariums, shutting down their studies. And so what did we do? So the one thing that I will point out here, so we had just released the product, this big downdraft, and we're still suffering from this. Yes, you guys know there's opportunity in it, but boy, it's not making it easy with all of the global stuff going on. But rather than hide, like everybody, really all the advice I got was conserve your capital, wait this out, all that. And we turned around, we leaned in. I found investors, small investors, give us money. And we knew we had a good product. We knew that there was good product market fit. We also knew, since we're in the biomedical research world, and I think you mentioned that getting vaccines to market faster, that's actually only a small part. We get drugs to market faster, but vaccines were one of the things that the vaccine manufacturers that are testing all the COVID vaccines are using our product now. So there was an opportunity there. So rather than like everybody's telling me, hide, go into your covers, conserve your capital, lay everybody off, we leaned in. We hired people. We hired a scientist. We hired the key people that we needed. We leaned in and we started to hit the market as much as we could. It was hard because everybody was, there was all this noise out there from COVID, but we managed to prove our value and our pricing. So pricing and packaging is the most important thing. If you don't price your product right and you don't package it right, you are.
Everybody tells you that though, right? Like how many times have you guys probably heard that? Like you got to price your product right. It's hard. It's really, we're still tinkering with it.
How much are you leaving on the table? Yeah, I mean. Right,
but then you don't get the sale because they're like telling you this, but then.
Right.
That's other than product market fit, pricing is just crazy.
And our product, the price range is around $50,000 for it. So if it's $70,000, you're leaving money on the table. If it's $30,000, you're losing customers. And so we really had to figure out that product pricing and the packaging. What are you selling to them? And we're still figuring it out, to Julie's point. So we are signing a contract next week for $7 million over 5 years. Ooh, but wow. But our pricing is all, we're still struggling with the pricing on it.
Is that one customer?
One customer.
Wow. But again, like blessing and curse is that one customer now.
Does.
When that one customer becomes more than half of your overall revenue and something happens.
Right.
It's existential.
Right.
So-
Yeah. And we have some stories.
We just did a SWOT analysis, right? It's a strength and a weakness, or it's a threat and a.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess while we're on that really quickly, so this one customer, I've been negotiating the contract with them for about 9 months. We really got down to the pricing. We were about ready to sign around March 1st, then around April 1st, and then around mid-April. And then they came to us mid-April and they said, deal's off. And we had hired up 10 people and trained them for this project.
And they were like, it's 99.999. We just gotta get it to the last. We were fighting over the word may and shall. That's it. That's it. That's what we were down to. And this has all the highest approvals. It's already been seen by our CFO and chief accounting officer.
Yeah. But anyway, so
Yeah.
now we things have righted, the ship is righted, and now everything is in line for a smooth glide path, we hope. But anyway, so next slide. 2021, that was when we finally were able to sort of recover out of the sort of find our footing, and we got equity financing. So we actually closed financing. Now, you guys are looking for investors. I've actually looked and counted the number of folders I've opened up for investors in this process, 50 folders. So that means I've probably talked to another 50 investors that I never even opened a folder up with. And it's no, 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 no. You will hear no every day, all the time, until finally you get a yes. And you got to figure out what that no, why are they saying no? Try to find a thread there.
We had a lot of no's until someone in the industry backed us. And then everyone went, oh, well, they're reputable.
Right.
Okay, we'll follow on then. We'll
Right.
put our money in.
Exactly. Yeah. So all of a sudden, 4x revenue bump last year, and starting to scale up. Got our board of directors really set. Next slide. And so here we are. We're in a scale up mode right now. So we've got, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but scale up is really, really hard. It's, it's as hard and terrifying as that scrappy survival mode that you're in for a long time. We've built our commercial team. We've just got another salesperson starting on Monday, but we're getting the commercial process started. We know how to sell our product now. We're starting to close deals. We got our product team is maturing now. We got, developers and designers and product manager, all led by Julie. And then we got our support team, the people that answer the phone and help on board and provide support to our customers. Gap financials, if you guys ever, if you know what that means, that's too bad because it really sucks. Yeah. But I mean,
as long as you can.
Yeah, I probably would have
Costs a lot of money.
probably $100,000 just trying to get our books up to gap, and now trying to maintain gap financing, got our product sales, and now we're also working on continuous process improvement because of that big 5-year, $7 million deal that we're closing right now requires that we are being audited, and it is intense. And so everything from employee training, security, processes, financials, everything, going through everything in our company and auditing it all. We have to get up to a certain level to pass that audit.
I would say I don't have a solution for this, but I went to a Gartner conference a long time ago, and they're talking about the transition from founder sales to commercial team. And then up until the end of 2021, beginning of this year, it was chucking it. And so that transition to you just think you're going to one day have money and hire salespeople. It doesn't quite, I don't know, we went through 3 or 4 who just were miserable before we found someone who kind of got the industry. So I think that transition from founder selling to actually getting your commercial team ramped up was kind of also a big toggle point for us.
Yeah, because commercial team is really hard to build, but I think we've got a really great commercial team now. We are, we're selling, we're closing, there's deals that are closing and our revenue starting to ramp. Next slide. So just really raising capital 100 no's, literally. I mean, that's, I got so tired of hearing no, but you just can't, you have to listen. You have to understand what the thread of continuous, you will hear stuff all over the map. It's really hard to find what the thread is, what you keep hearing in all the noise.
Those of you who are doing enterprise SaaS, when you walk into Boston and they go, how many people downloaded your app today? okay. It's
Right,
not
we're
the
in a-
right place
right.
to be.
Right, yeah, so you got to also find those investors really quickly. You got to find the ones that are interested, and just don't waste, they will waste your time. And they will even tell you, we're going to waste your time, basically, and they will waste your time. And that is brutal. So it's a full-time job for me, raising capital for a long time. So, but, you know, Series Seed is where we've been, you know, validating our product, building the early prototypes, evaluating market size, TAM, SAM, and SOM, you know, total addressable market, serviceable addressable market, share of market, all that stuff. Investors want to know. You got to get your value prop down, product market fit. That was what Julie was working on. You know, getting our business partnerships. We have some really great business partnerships. Can't do this alone in the industry. You got to find businesses that will partner with you, and learn how to sell a product and begin to grow revenue, and then start having incredible financial models. So our financial models early on were just, they're great. They were incredible. Now they're starting to be credible. Next, and so here's where we are now in terms of trying to, you know, accelerate the growth. So now we're moving into that scale up. We got a great leadership team, you know, people, Julie, myself, and our director level, director of marketing, director of sales, director of technology, all on the leadership team, really building up that commercial team, you know, growing all of our teams, getting all of our teams hardened right now so that we can actually be a company, you know. And the other thing is this one's really hard, developing company infrastructure. HR, we have a HR now. Like, I mean, you know, and there's issues. Somebody the other day, and I was like, okay. Anyway, but you know, so you have, we have enough people now where we have HR, we have payroll, financial, training, security, all that stuff is all being developed since January, a little bit into the latter part of last year.
Seed series is when you're still really scrappy and can kind of do whatever you want. And now you're really like 20 something employees, you're now required to do all these trainings and these state things to abide by the law. Not that you weren't abiding by the laws first, but right, kind of. But you have to have sexual harassment training every year. You have to have all these things, and the posters have to be on the walls. And I won't say it's not still fun, but like you were definitely in that transition to more processes and stability, and things have to be by the book, and you can't just go throw something together anymore like you could in the early days.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely, and sell your product. Don't forget about that.
Yeah.
Next slide. So where are we now? So we'll move pretty quickly. You got a few more minutes. I know that usually run, okay. Okay, so I'm going to feel like I have to just rush to try for 4 more minutes.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that just that slide, I don't know how many times we went through an investment and they would say, you know, money fixes all problems. And we would say, yes, that's why we're here. But what they're really saying is sell your product, sell it, like come back to us when you have more people using it. 1, you have more money and you're not as desperate. And then 2, we're more willing to give you the risk. So
yeah, the investors hate, it's really weird. You know, most investors hate risk. So they're always trying to find a way to say no in that whole process. That's why 100 of them said, about 50, yeah, 100 of them said no. So what we've done, Julie and I, we have an unusual structure here. So Julie and I have really hit it off on a professional level, how to work together. And a big part of it is the diversity of the way we think and the respect we have for each other. And so rather than have CEO and president, Julie's the president and I'm the CEO, and we divided the work this way, and it is great. I don't know how people do it any other way, to be honest with you, but you really have to have a co-founder who,
unless you have an amazing COO or someone, like I just can't, the amount of work is crushing for both of us as it is,
right?
Much less trying to do both.
Right, and just having that, you know, somebody that you can, like Julie and I argue every single day, and that's actually the plus of it, right? You know, is that we always come to agreement at the end and we move forward as a unit. We don't necessarily think it was the right decision necessarily, but we always say, okay, we're going to embrace this because we have to. And usually, actually, I think we do really come to the best decisions that way. But it's really that diversity of thinking and diversity of background that really makes for us to be a powerful company. So I'll just talk quickly about my side and you can go over your bullets. So my side as CEO, you know, my first job is to arm wrestle with Julie every day, and then, you know, manage the legal, the finance, the quality team has to report in a separate structure than the product team, because we're in this pharmaceutical regulated industry, so quality can't be mixed with product. Human resources, sales, marketing. Sales and marketing are under me right now as well. And that's just adds a way.
We used to have them under me, and the amount of projects and tech and operations was just crushing. So we put them under Chuck, and I think that's been a much more successful place to have sales and marketing. So basically everything to do with the product, the tech, the app, our development teams, projects, these big special projects, and all the science and user experience all falls under my side of the house. So I'm managing, Chuck's team goes out and gets the $7 million contract, but then our team has to actually execute it and make sure it goes off without a hitch and plan it.
Yeah. Next slide. So here's our current team. Actually, there's one more we're adding. This is all of our FTE. Almost all of these people are in Maine. I think there's 2 of them that are not in Maine. This guy's not in Maine. This guy's in Massachusetts, and
But he's moving to Maine.
But he's moving to Maine.
Actually, so is he. He's moving in October. So
Right.
I think Janae is our only.
Right.
Like,
Right. Janae is not in Maine. But anyway, we're building a company in Maine, and that's kind of really cool. You know, really trying to do that. And I will say that, you know, if you're trying to build a company, doing it in Maine, there's a lot of resources in Maine that will help you because you're doing that. MTI has been great to us.
Yeah, huge shout out to Maine Tech Institute.
Yeah.
Maine Technology.
Yeah, MTI has been huge for us. Yeah, and still are really great connection there. Next slide. And then we have, these are contractors. We have, there's about 10, this represents probably 10 or 15, because like our tech contractors, there's 4 in there. We have 2 bookkeepers that work for us, a quality person, she's amazing, and Richard Clark, our CFO, I think he's probably helping at least one of the companies here as well. But anyway, so we have a lot of contractors too, and that's really when you add the contractors plus our FTE, we're talking 35 people every day are working for RockStep. And I'll tell you what, it costs a lot of money. So be ready. I mean, now, like where it was, you raised $50,000 and you think, well, a couple months or something, a runway. Now it's like a couple days. It's really, you know, but the growth and the potential opportunity is there. So our team, you know, the leadership team with Julie and I at the helm, board of directors, and then we got a great advisory board. And I will say, if you don't have a good advisory board, get the right people from industry. The reason why we have a lot of what we have is because these people have helped unlock the doors. Because
these are the same, these are, you know, Ray Pilicki, our chairman, was the former CIO of Novartis and Biogen. He took Biogen from this scrappy startup to what it is today. He, in the early days when we, you know, just had a smile, he was our credibility. People let us in the door because of him, because he knew people. So he got us in the door to these people doing like cellular stuff too. But eventually they opened doors to the places that we have now. So I think this was key to helping our credibility and reputation early on.
Yeah. And these guys, I mean, they're all in big pharmaceutical companies or Harvard Medical School. And one thing that I'll really just say, don't hold on to your equity, because I don't pay these guys, but they got equity when we brought them on. We could talk, it's not a huge amount, but they got to have some skin, you know, some sense of ownership of the company. So, you know, that's what you got starting out is some equity. And I would just say, don't worry about it. Like if you're going to be a rocket ship and you're going to go to the moon, literally, you are going to make enough money where sharing your equity with the people that help you get there. It's just part of the deal. So next slide. So figuring out who we are, this is also really, really important soon for probably most of you. Next slide. You know, what's your mission? What do you get up in the morning for? And for us,
that's what, 6 words, but this took, again, years. Like years to agree on this. Like Do we get cures to market faster? Do we get drug discovery faster? Do we fail? Do we help pharmas fail faster? Do we, you know, like trying all these things out? But at the end of the day, this really resonated, and this anchors us going forward.
So what do you want to be in 5 years? So this is also really crucial. Like, you know, early on, I didn't know. And Julie and I had to make sure that we agree on this, because we're driving this thing forward and we've got to bring a whole team of people with us. So we want to be the world's leading, you know, software for in vivo operations and data. We know that now. We want to be the world's leading. We are ahead of the pack right now, and that's where we want to stay. We could, you know, not want to be the world, you know, that means rapid growth. It means a lot of work and effort, and that's what we want to be. But we agree on it. The fact that we agree on it now gives us direction.
And that scientific advisory board that you saw a little bit ago, I remember we all sat in a conference room in Boston in 2016, in the fall of 2016, and this guy Reiner says, what are you guys gonna, I don't understand. Are you the ELN? Are you the lab notebook? Are you this? Like, we don't, and where do you fit? And but we don't fit anywhere. We created a new thing. And they just sat there and said, what are you guys gonna be when you grow up? And I feel like we've asked it every single meeting we've had with them every quarter, they've asked that. And at the end of 2021, they were like, you know what? You finally know, this is it, you've done it. But it took that long to figure out, what are we actually going to be when we grow up, like the best at?
Right. And and is it realistic? And
right.
you know, because you can say, I'm going to be this, you know, but is it realistic? And I think it is realistic now from where we are. Next slide. So understand your market. This was not that hard for us because we know where we wanted to go, but we didn't know where we fit.
Right. The segments of those was more difficult to discern.
Right. And actually that one contract research organization is very, very different. We didn't realize the financial differences in those organizations, and it's just a complete, you know, so now we're got this figured out. Next slide. And then understanding what your, you know, what your values are, you know, bring them to the table, repeat them every day. You know, I almost, you know, we talk about this a lot, you know, take care of yourself. If you're not healthy yourself, you're not going to do the company any good. Take care of our company, because that's what we're all here for. Take care of each other and have respect for the individual. These are the core things we bring to our self every day. And then, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion we're passionate about that.
And we'll talk about this kind of in our lessons learned slide in a couple of slides, but you work hard, right? None of us, this is not a 9 to 5. And your early team is working almost, if not as hard as you are. And no one can stop because everything's critical and there's no more resources. And you like, what are you going to do? But at the end of the day, you can tell when your staff is not quite right, or your team member is like, you're just looking at them and you're like, and I will say this, like, you're not taking, like, if you don't go take a vacation, I'm not letting you in this week, right? You have to go take care of yourself, because you can't do any of these other things. So we come back to this a lot because burnout is very, very real. And
I don't get off from that either. Julie's kicked me out of the office to go on my first vacation in a long time next month.
I'm like, almost literally
she said, Donnelly, you're out of the office.
I'm going to have IT changes.
Anyway, yeah, so I have to take a vacation too. Next slide. So figuring this out too. So what do you want the world to think? You know, so we're presenting to the world. We could say we're a feature factory. We have more features than everybody in the world. That's good, but that's not what I want the world to think of us as excellence in customer experience and quality. Right? If we win that, we win the game. Yeah.
When your customers ask for a reference to call someone else and say, before we buy, we want to talk to your existing customers, or your investors, inevitably you're going to call your customers for references. These are what we want our customers to be talking about.
Yeah. And I will say we just, we're working with some investors now that we're really close. We had a phone call today with them, and they did a sort of an NPS score, NPS score on us with a bunch of our customers, and he said it was just top. So I feel really good about that. You never know, like you're always afraid to call the customers sometimes. So this is really key, and this applies to everybody here. So you really need to know that we call this our 3-ring binder because everything early on, we were being distracted by all these other industries. Like there's things that are going to be, we could be in the aquaculture, we could be in energy, we could be in all these other things.
Smart agriculture.
Right.
Things, yeah.
And so what are you deeply passionate about? What drives your economic engine? And what are we best in the world at? If we know those things, then everything that comes in, we throw it out if it doesn't meet these criteria. Seriously, it's been huge to get this down. And so we know that, we're deeply passionate about getting Cures to market. SaaS subscription licenses, not services, right? I mean, this is really what drives our economic engine. We know that. And then we know that we're best in the world at this, managing in vivo data and operations. And I will hand that to Julie because that's why we're best in the world at it, because she made it happen. So,
and this is hard, right? Like, this is hard when you can't make payroll and something shiny comes through the door. Like we had a military thing come through one day, and I was like, but it's going to be really lucrative. And right, like everything will take you. This big $7 million contract will take us away from our roadmap. Right. There's only so many resources you have, so
it fits here.
It fits here, right? It kind of reprioritizes the roadmap, but you are constantly having to reevaluate and just hold things to this. Kind of the same thing they say, like, don't be afraid to turn a customer down if you know they're going to cost you more because they're so needy. But that's hard to say no to immediate money when you have people to pay.
Yeah. We haven't missed payroll yet.
We have not missed
all of those
yet.
years.
It was skin of our teeth many times.
Right. Except when we hired you, we didn't pay you, and I wasn't getting paid at that time either. So I don't feel so bad. So yeah. So lessons learned. So this is really this whole talk was actually really intimidating for me because there's such a huge number of lessons. There's so much, like, where do we start in like 9 years of like burning, churning hell, and we're gonna try to boil it down to. Anyway, it's not burning, churning hell, but it's 9 years of really, 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 really grueling effort. So I tried to come up with some lessons learned in the last slide, and we'll just walk through them briefly. But there were, like, my list of the lessons learned was 50 long or something.
I know, we had to like cut this because it was, I was in the shower this morning going, oh, we forgot that. We really,
yeah. So, okay, I'll take the first one. We'll just go back and forth. Yeah, so startup is both rewarding and terrifying. It's so rewarding because you're self-actualizing what you want to do. You are the master of your destiny, but it is terrifying. We are always driving a train way too fast down a mountain without brakes, and we don't even know like whether we're laying the tracks out in front of us. It's rewarding, but it's terrifying.
And you have to be able to get along with your co-founders. This is a marriage. This is a marriage. You will blow up, you will scream, you will have terrible blowouts, you will have amazing times. It is just like a marriage, and you can't just walk out. If you're going to walk out the door at the first time something horrible happens because you're under so much stress, it's probably not the best relationships. But so Chuck and I are very different in obvious ways, but also cognitively very different. When something happens on a call with a customer, or I'm like, I can't, and like he can calm me down, or vice versa. We have a dynamic that complements each other. And that can be difficult. So we were trying to kind of think about, like, how do you find your first get co-founders to complement what you don't do well. Don't be afraid to give out that equity. And when I did Founder University in San Francisco with one of the big investors out there, they talked a lot about the co-founder relationship and try someone out for 6 months, like bring someone in and offer a full equity if it's working out mutually for both of you. Like, just give it some time to go through the highs and lows together and see if this is a long-term relationship. Because I mean, this has been 6 years, and I can tell you we've had the lowest of lows and the highest of highs, sometimes in the same day.
Yeah, oftentimes in the same day.
Like not being able to make payroll in the morning, and at 4 o'clock in the mail, the big pharma check finally comes after 9 months of expecting it. Like,
there's fires burning everywhere. So every day, today, yesterday, there's fires burning everywhere. And you got to focus on the biggest conflagrations that are in front of you. And sometimes they're huge. Yesterday, there was a big conflagration.
I mean, it's like working on this. This has been on top of mind. We talk about it every day. And it's like, well, our project manager had a blowout with this project manager for a client. So, okay, that's the most important today. Go save that relationship. Okay, and then you walk in the door with a to-do list, but I've had the same things on my to-do list, which are very important and sometimes critical, but they're not urgent today. Like a communication deck to help our team be better communicators to customers. It's really important and they have to do it, but it's not gonna make the list when, you know, a customer relationship is in crisis that day.
Yeah, so there's going to be fires burning all the time. Just don't worry about it. It's going to feel like the rest of the world is burning down. Focus on the most important ones for sure.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think one of the things I was mentioning to Chuck is I feel like I've become a procrastinator. And I don't mean to be, but you don't have a choice. Like I've really got to get to this demo, that customer demo. It's like in 3 hours. And then your brain's just going to push it out when it has to, because you can't focus on that when you've got all these other things going on. So I feel like in some ways it feels like procrastinating, but it's really prioritizing the fires that you have to work on in the moment.
Get out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
You're not making progress if you're feeling like he's too late back there. He's in his comfort zone. No, but seriously, you got to be out of your comfort zone. You got to like, man, things are just going. I'm feeling too relaxed. I got to go and get out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Want to do the hire?
Yeah. Hire for both culture and skill. We've had hires that investors dictated because they came out of pharma who had skill. It turned out they didn't, but let's say they did. Almost took the company down. Like literally the company almost died from that one hire. That was like one of our lowest low, bad times. But we got stronger up because of it. And we realized we really have to start hiring for culture. So we ended up having to let someone go a few months ago who was the best culture fit. And we loved him and everyone loved him. And he was just so good. The customers loved him. And he just didn't have the scientific background to learn what he needed to do to use the app and teach our customers how to use it. And he tried, and we talked about it, and we had training programs. So it's really both. And it's, again, that's difficult when you're looking at your team who is run ragged and have bags under their eyes and they're desperate for help and you can't find the combination that you want. But it's worth it in the end. And
okay, continuous learning. That's one thing,
So
you know, you're gonna have to just be a continuous learner. The whole team's gotta be continuous learners. I didn't know what a CEO was when I started the company. I had to Google CEO and oh yeah, put it on my business card.
Yeah.
It's true.
Talking to the board, we're like, I did
yeah,
the job as a president. We
right.
think we're going to split this, and you're going to be a president. And I was like, Delaware C Corp president. Oh, okay. Okay, great.
Yeah, but you just got to be a continuous learner. You can't ever be afraid of what's in front of you. Don't delay difficult decisions.
Well, so let's go back to that, because that goes with hiring as well. Like, figure out if someone is continuous learner through hiring, because we had some, I think our shortest hire and fire, which it was a mutual, was less than 12 hours. Someone who was a data analytics person who had used big data analytics software before, who just got data, and we needed that for our customers and some of the things we were building. And in day one, I said, all right, so here's some customer data. It was body weights, and they need a pivot. So what we want to do is build a thing in Clients to just pivot this, and probably write a macro for them just in the interim. And she goes, I don't know how to do that in Excel. And she started crying. And I was like, well, can you figure it out? She's like, I don't know how to do this. So like that night I went home, my husband's an engineer. I asked him, we got on Google and we figured out how to write a macro to pivot this table for them and do what they need to do. Like, Google it. I don't know, like, go figure it out. Like, find those people that are like, I don't know how to do it, but I'll figure it out and see what I can do.
Right. And you know, the next one is don't delay the difficult decision. We let that person go the next day because we realized it was unfortunate, but we realized if you can't survive day one in a startup, you're not going
Right.
to survive the next 100 or 200. Or
But
whatever.
we did delay many difficult decisions, like people that you knew you can't move in a way because you're trying to get investment and you need that person on your resume. Like investors need to see you have that stable people, you know, tech team and sales team, but you can't move forward with them. It's toxic or it's not working or customers don't like them or they don't like, you know, you're not meshing on what the business is going to do in the long term. You know, who knows what it could be from. You can't move forward with them and you can't really move forward without them. So you have to move forward without them and just make it's better in the long run. But some of those decisions were painful.
Yeah, I mean, we had to let go, you know, a number of people just weren't going to survive. This one I like, entrepreneurs are risk-seeking missiles. So you guys are all risk-seeking missiles. You know? And it's true, man. You're constantly driving that train like over a cliff. You know, jump off a cliff and assemble the airplane on the way down. Don't hoard your equity. We already mentioned that. That's how you're going to get your key people early on. That's what it's there for. And then this is likely the hardest thing that you've ever done. I mean, literally, you know, Julie and I have been doing it together for 6 years. I did it for a couple of years before that. It's really, really hard. And we starting to...
I will say, he did have the hardest thing. And he said, well, I've never delivered a baby.
I did.
And I said, well, I've never fought cancer. So let's make it likely. But it's, for both of us, probably the hardest thing we've ever done.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, that's it.
But neither one of us would ever survive in a, like when I was you know, working in the labs, it's mind numbing. I would never survive in a normal.
Right. That's
clearly I'm a
risk-seeking missiles. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So thanks everybody. Hopefully this was. Sure. Yeah.
All right. What do you have for questions, guys? All right. I'm going to start out.
Okay.
On your board of directors, notice you guys are on the board of directors. Is that typical?
Well, usually the CEO is the chairman of the board of directors or is on the board of directors. And Julie and I are sort of co-CEOs of the company. So when we put together our board with the investors, we said, look, we're a team. Ain't happening any other way.
Is your board representative of your investors?
We have two investor representatives.
So we have,
and we have
so the original board was Chuck, myself, and Ray Palicki, who I mentioned earlier. And Ray, you know, friend of family at this point, right? So then when you bring investors in, they of course want board representation. So they have, actually I take it back. So we had a convertible note that we had to take during the pandemic to stay alive. And so the note holders had representation. So that is, again, someone from industry, but someone they voted in. So again, like friend of the family in the industry, but they voted in to represent our note holders. And then when we took our Series C, the lead investor came in on our board. And then we have two board observer positions. So MTI has a board observer position, and then one of our industry board observers as well.
And then you still maintain the board of advisors.
Yes.
Yeah, the board of
the
The scientific advisory board, yeah.
At least for a while, we are, yeah. I mean, they're good sounding boards, although I think we've sort of now maybe even refreshed with some different, but they've been huge to us. I mean, we literally are where we are because they helped open some doors. So we meet with them quarterly, basically.
Yeah. How did you go about finding your investors? Any tips for
finding the investors?
Yeah.
It's
go for it.
Yeah. That's all the tips I
a
have.
lot of, I mean, early on, so before we had our board of directors, we had a business advisory board, which was local people in Maine, right?
Yeah.
And so there was some introductions that came through that in the Maine economy, but then go into the Boston.
Yeah, so basically through accelerators. So we've been in 3 accelerators, both, Top Gun, Next Cubed, which is in San Diego, and then Thai Scale Up in Boston. So they helped introduce us to investors. The other thing is the Capital Network in Boston, TCN. They're awesome. And I highly recommend you get down there because then you get right into the sort of the network of investors in Boston. It's really hard though, because the investors in Boston will say, where are you guys again? You know, because they have MIT right next to our Harvard, and they got like all of this deal flow right next to them, and they say, I gotta drive all the way to Portland or Waterville, you know. So you got
literally, we were told in San Francisco they will not invest more than a mile outside of the city center. Literally. And then in Boston, no more than an hour.
Yeah. So a lot of, I mean, and that's not, you know, one of our investors in the UK. So
right. Well, so I was going to add on to that when you.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so get down to Boston. I mean, it depends on the kind of capital you need. Like, we need a fair amount of capital to move forward. You know, and we also need industry expertise, and there's not a lot of pharmaceutical industry expertise in Maine. So the expertise was in Boston. And so that's where we went to get our investment. But if you have, you know, these groups, you guys, I'm sure, have investors, you know, the pitch thing that you got coming, there'll be investors in the audience, I assume.
Yeah.
We've done that and pitched to the investors.
And those tables after, like, those were fantastic for the investors coming by and being like, what are the terms on your note again? Like, talk to me about this. And that was great. But that the Boston network is going to be a lot of no's. You know, what really changed for us was continuing to have conversations with people we could partner with in the industry. That changed everything, getting that. So as an example, there are other softwares that if you look at our Venn diagrams, they almost just perfectly kiss, or maybe overlap a tiny bit, but they fill a need that we hear, oh, do you do this? No, we don't do that. And they hear, do you do this? So by partnering and integrating our softwares, we provide a stronger product than either of us can separately. And so if you can find those people that sometimes early on, you're like, what are they doing? Are they our competitors? Right? But actually, if you can find who's like really neatly tied up with you and who's really successful, then it's just meeting those connections and talking to them over. And some of these took years of relationship building. But those are the people who now have invested most in our company.
Yeah, I mean, so there's different kinds of investors. The angel investors, obviously, Maine Angels and all of those, you can reach out and pitch to them. Where we found success was strategic investors, people that really understand our industry. We fell flat with investment firms, venture groups that didn't understand our industry, and they just used a lot of our time talking to us and went nowhere. But when we have investors that are strategics, and so there's all those different kinds of investors. You got your strategics, you got your private equity, you got your angel investors, and they all have different sort of motivations for investing. So
did you start asking for, like, I'm looking for this type of investor that invests in this category, and ask people to connect to you?
So yes, it within the accelerators, trying to find investors who were good matches for us, right? Yeah. The other thing is I get emails every day from investors, and I don't respond to them hardly at all, but I used to respond to a lot of them. It's hard to find a good match. You're in the food?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to start a cannabis edible company.
Cannabis edible, yeah. So I don't know who, is it medical? Is it recreational? Yeah. So I'll invest. No. But anyway, yeah, you want to find investors that are interested. Walk away from ones, they will waste so much of your time. You will spend all your time talking.
Boston is where we heard how many people have downloaded your app, just over and over and over again. I mean, this is something that you go in and you train, and it takes a month to onboard into. Like, this is changing in a pharmaceutical company's entire digital trajectory for a decade. You're not downloading it in one day and just hopping on board, right? And they just don't understand that. So for, in your industry, find out like who gets what you're doing, like who's kind of doing something like it that maybe you can hop on their bandwagon. Or if there's, I know there's some cannabis softwares out of, Colorado. Like, I don't know, like brainstorming just different ideas around that.
Yeah, and having good financials and projections and showing that you've got a revenue ramp that you can build on, things like that are really important.
We got a question from Sasha.
Oh, Sasha.
Unmute.
Yeah, mute.
Unmuted. Okay. Weird echo. So many questions, and I'm so surprised by how many parallels there are to what we're doing. I wouldn't have ever thought there's so many parallels to this. So it's really good to hear you guys. If nothing else, you know, misery loves company. Although you guys seem to be doing awesome, and payroll is such a painful thing, I got to tell you.
Oh yeah.
haven't had the last minute run, but it's been close. Maybe a day or two shy. So one of the questions was actually now that you've found investors, did you find that? I mean, you're encountering the same thing that I'm encountering, which is like Maine is not a great place for anything that isn't certain sectors, and you just have to get out of the state. So one quick question is for instance, the San Diego accelerator, like for our neck of the industry, so much is in California, Texas, Florida.
Yeah.
Did you have to physically go to that San Diego accelerator? Oh, bumknucker.
Yeah, so it was a virtual accelerator, but we went out there probably 3 or 4 times over the period of about 18 weeks. We'd be out there once a month or so.
You'd go to kick it off and meet everyone, and then maybe like halfway through, I can't remember, and then
4 visits.
The big pitch, so the pitch day, right, the demo day, and it would be in San Diego. They'd invite all the universities, they'd invite all the local investors, right, because it's such a hotbed. And then you would have the cocktail hour and tables after, and that's where all the investors can schmooze with you. But yeah.
Did you have to pay for that accelerator?
That was the Next Cube accelerator. But that's a digital health, you know, specifically in the healthcare space. Yeah. But you know, the completely different investors out in the West Coast and Boston area, and it's really strange because we pitched in Silicon Valley. We did everything. Silicon Valley, they just want to know, like, how are you going to, you know, ramp up and make $1 billion? Oh, you don't have $1 billion. You know, they're just big money people. Everything's just
decision makers. Right?
Yeah, right. But you go to Boston and they pull out their spreadsheet and they're asking about your CACs and your COGS and your, you know, and your gross margins and all this stuff. And California, they're just like,
East Coast investors would be like, drag you on for a long time out of Boston, and they would, you know, I just Chuck would be like, another phone call with them, another phone call with them, another phone call with them, and they'd be like, your projections are unrealistic. That's ridiculous. And we had literally just come from our Next Cube accelerator going, these aren't big enough.
Right. On the West Coast, they tell us our.
We started holding 2 different ones.
We
if
had
you were
2
going to
different
the
decks.
West Coast, you gave that deck, and if you're going to the East Coast, you gave those projections.
Is that because East Coast is just more conservative?
It's
I think so. I really think so. I think there's a decided difference.
They're frugal.
Yeah, it's a different mindset, and everybody was telling me about it, but it was true. When we were out in Silicon Valley, it was like, you know, show us how you're going to conquer the world, you know. And out here they say, like, you're trying to conquer the world. You can't do that, you know. It's like wait a minute.
How did you manage all of the conflicting advice that you get on those pitches? Because I do see this for entrepreneurs all the time. Somebody will say, oh, you put that in, you shouldn't have put that in your deck. Yeah. And then, so you try to incorporate that in, you go back out again, and then you get completely different feedback. Yeah. How did you tune out the noise of that?
It's really hard. I have probably 150 versions of my pitch deck too. Yeah. I mean, literally constantly changing.
Next Cube, or it was one of them where I asked that question and they said, it doesn't really matter if your financial slide is solid. If your financial slide is solid, they won't pick the rest of your deck apart. But in early days, just somebody's not going to like something in your deck.
Yeah, but you're right. It is real. It's mind numbing, and it's just like you go home and you just think, like, you know, I just put together this beautiful deck, and everybody, you know, liked it here, and then this, right?
I put all the things in it, and then
right.
And investors are often not very smart, and I do think that is a challenge.
Right, they got money, but they're not. They don't know your industry. They don't know. And they want it. They need to be heard. For some reason, they need to give you advice.
Yeah.
And it's like
their way of saying no.
Right.
Yeah, I know it's true.
I just had a question, because this all the investor and all of that is it's all very new for me. So I'm learning. So if you have an investor and they're in your industry and you really are sought after them, and you have one that it just has the money, right? Then of course it comes down to the term sheet, is what I'm understanding at this point, right? So do you have different strategies between each of those kind of investors, or how does that work?
You want, if you can, you want smart money. I mean, early on, you just need money. but the investors that we have now, they're smart money.
What do you mean by that, smart money?
That means that they know the industry and they can open the doors for you in the industry, and they can basically, a lot of the stuff that's happening now is because, in fact, pretty much all the real exciting stuff is because we have investors that make it happen.
As an example, we have a I don't want to say sister company, but like it was a device company that could have used our software, and we were very close with that company. They were a startup on the West Coast, so orders of magnitude like $20-30 million raises, and they didn't get their last raise, and they ended up bringing in like a former CEO of Pepsi or something, right? Like the last raise they got was more private equity. It wasn't what we call smart money. And so they said, well, we got to figure this out. So we're going to bring in the CEO of Pepsi. The CEO of Pepsi has no idea what life sciences is. And the company basically crumbled, could not get their next round of investment. All the science team gone. And so you want the people who, whether the founders stay forever or not, who understand the business and aren't just like, oh, let's bring in this shiny CEO who's going to magically solve all our problems, because that never works. But that's generally what like the PEs want to do.
So, but do you have, let's say, I mean, if you're a cash strapped, you're just looking for the money, like you said. So do you have different term sheets?
Yeah. So the way we did it is we started out with convertible notes. Basically, that's a really easy vehicle to bring money in. You don't have to do the whole equity. Equity financing is really expensive to close.
Is that at your seed round point?
Yeah, well, so we have a funny series of investments, but the notes were seed, basically, or seed round notes. And the thing about that is it's really, it doesn't cost much to do it. You can get a check, you put it in the bank, you give them a note. You get a check, put it in the bank, give them a note. You have, there's some terms on that note, and it's you have $1 million that you're gonna try to raise through that note, but you can just bring in the money. You don't have to do it all in one day. You can spend 6 months just bringing in checks, and that was great for us early on because we needed cash flow to augment our cash. So that was great. But then when you get to an equity round, it cost us $50,000 in lawyer fees just to close the equity round.
Was the convertible notes like a lawyer written document?
Yep.
Or something you created?
Yeah. So basically the terms are usually, the note is going to convert on some equity event, right? And so the terms are, what is that equity event? Is it a $5 million equity raise, a $1 million equity raise, whatever? That's one term. The other term is, what's the interest rate on the note? So while they've got the investment, they got that, they're getting interest. What's the conversion discount? So when you actually convert, they get a little better deal because they came in early, so they get a discount. There's usually some terms around what happens if the company sells while the note's open. Trying to think of what else there was, but the terms are really simple.
But yeah, the attorney draws it up. They've got these. They just ask you what terms you want, and the valuation. There's a valuation cap often.
Yeah, valuation cap usually. Right.
But that's a call with the attorney, as opposed to $50,000 for our a $1 million round was $50,000 in lawyer fees.
Yeah.
Did you look at, like, instead of convertible notes to equity, do you look at any kind of like debt financing?
So no, other than MTI. Well, MTI is a loan, but it's not backed by your own personal assets. Debt financing, most of it, you have to say, well, here's my house. I don't want to do that.
But I heard some investors will do debt financing.
Yeah, if you have
revenue.
What's that?
If you have revenue, a lot.
Yeah, if you have revenue, right? They'll 20% of your revenue. A lot of times they'll do debt financing on, or if you have assets, capital assets or something like that.
If you can find a strategic investor like the one that invested there, they've talked about doing like some debt or bridge to something, but they know, like it's never actually worked out. We never really did it, but they know who you are, they know your industry, they understand, like they're a little bit less risk than going to the bank who says, what are the assets you're putting up for collateral?
Yeah, bank loans are tough,
Did your $7 million customer open the floodgates on equity investors? Suddenly, was that, you got the customer and then all of a sudden it was?
Well, they're also, yes, actually, once we got the customers, when everything changed, when we first started, when we first signed our first contract, that's when everything changed. We've signed several contracts with them now. And so this next one is just another one of the, but they are also an investor.
So I was just gonna ask, are any customers investors?
Yes. Yeah.
Do they then prevent you from doing business with their competition?
No, not as investors. No, because they want, no, they get on your board. They could be a pain, but we haven't had that problem. But they, you know, being on the board, they're supposed to be representing all the investors. You know, they're supposed to help the company grow. So.
And they will usually like, so our board observer for this customer, if we're specifically talking about like when they were going to pull the contract and it was, she will recuse herself and not come to the call. So
when did you guys bring on the board?
When did we?
Yeah.
We grew it over time. So it started out as me and Julie and Ray. This guy, Ray, we were just introduced to through Microsoft. It was actually through Top Gun, through Microsoft. You know, we met this guy, Ray. He was the CIO of Novartis. So I brought him on, gave him some equity, he got on our board, and that was a big move for credibility for us. He was excited about what we do. So that was a small board. Then through our convertible note, we had to bring in somebody to represent the note holders. And then when we closed our last equity round, we have a board member. So it grew from 3 to 5. We have 5 now, right?
And I would say pre the round last June, it was, we had a board.
They're pretty bored.
It was more casual.
Right, yeah.
It's, hey, we have these problems. Can we chat to you and just get some perspective? Or we have these people looking to buy us. Should we do this? Like, we talked and like we meet like once a month, but it wasn't your structured board you think about. Like when we got the equity raise, that's when it's, now we have someone taking minutes and logging them and signed off as the Delaware C Corp secretary and et cetera. Like that really came with the round.
Right, that came.
When you guys form the board and also, well, and you're providing equity to the other person there and anybody else you shared equity with, what was your strategy for dilution? Because as we go through these things, you know, what I keep hearing is you'd really like to get to the final round and not have lost control of the company or the organization. What is your strategy there?
We lost control of the company.
We had, with the pandemic, we had no choice. Like that wasn't the plan, but in order to keep the company afloat, we had to take investment during the pandemic that it was very important to our strategic partners to try to make us at least somewhat whole again.
Yeah.
But we don't have control of the company.
So Julie and I together, before we signed our last round, could make any decision we wanted in the company. Now Julie and I together are the largest vote, as long as we're not fighting, we're good. But no, so between the two of us, we still have the largest vote, but we don't control, even the two of us together don't have
We do
control.
not have 50% of the company.
Right.
And I would say it is important to, even if it's just a board that's submitted to your attorney or to the Delaware, however you submit it to the C Corp, right? Have something in place before your round, because they're going to want that's part of your negotiation with your round, is how many more board seats you take. And you want to keep as many friendly faces on your board as possible. So if you've got those 3 friendly, you know, you and maybe another co-founder and whoever your friendly faces are, you can negotiate that as part of your round, keeping them in there.
Right. But our board, yeah, there's actually nobody in the company that has more than 50%. So it always takes a consensus to make a decision.
Do you incentivize your employees with stock or stock options?
We do. Everybody gets stock options, but you know, early on, people got a lot more than they are now. I mean, now we're, you know, everybody gets a little bit just so they have a little something to.
I mean, early on, you have no money and it's incredibly risky. So they certainly got a lot more.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was one of my questions in the stock option one, because I was thinking about if you're bringing on investors at that time, you can't afford to hire an employee, but you can give them in turn the stock options.
Right. So when first brought Julie on, literally had no money. I said, Julie, if you want to, I'll give you stock options. And so we wrote up an agreement for stock options. And then when the money came in, and then at some point we actually switched that whole thing into a common stock and stuff. But early on, there was no money.
That's interesting.
Right. And then at that point, it can't be ISO. We put to do non-qual stock options, but you can figure out it's all roughly the same.
So all of that workshop we had yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
Interview at the Carta.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it's getting kind of late. Should we finish up with just some final questions?
Well, I'm bummed that I'm not there because I would probably be taking beers with these guys all night long. And you guys don't have to say this number, I totally understand it, but what did, for your convertible note round, or I guess your seed round, where it was not a priced round, how much did you end up raising through all that?
So since we started, because we got $2 million from the NIH, that was a really good chunk of change. We've raised about $7 million now.
Yeah.
Plus you have customers of $7 million, or is that?
No, that's plus. Yeah, that's not, that's, yeah, that's I didn't sign it yet. So.
Okay. Oh, wow.
It's being circulated for internal signatures there right now.
But no, it's taken off. It takes a ton of money to make this happen now, but it's taken off.
And you did MTI, you did Maine Angels?
MTI got some from Maine Angels. They were pretty important at one point.
Venture?
Maine Venture Fund, no.
No, so then you went straight to your first investors?
Yeah, so the investors that we got now were that was the first real venture sort of.
And they were industries. Like
yeah, they're all right. Yeah, these guys, yeah.
They all came from
they know, and it's so helpful to have people, and as long as, and the other thing is people that know your industry really well, it's great, but you don't want people that are trying to run your company either at the same time. You want people that are.
What do you guys do with the no's? Every time you got a no from an investor, did you ask for something on the way out the door, like you do in sales? Like, did you ask for, if it's not right for you, can you refer us to somebody?
Oh yeah, actually, got a lot of.
Yeah, a lot of referrals, a lot of come see us when you have $1 million in ARR.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that it was really tough is the investors always they want you to get to the next level to de-risk. Right. And so a lot of them along the way, well, as soon as you get to this next, as soon as you get to this next, as soon as you get to this next, by the time we got to the point where those guys we weren't going to take their investment, right? Because we got far enough along that really good investors were now interested. So they kind of just priced themselves out. They kept saying, they kept asking us, well, get a little bit more revenue, show another customer. And they just kept moving the goalposts. And it's so frustrating, and it is really disheartening, and it can ruin you because you're running out of money and you're talking to these investors and you think they're coming in, and you've wasted a month or two. Sometimes we had investors that told us that they were going to invest and then not. And so we brought together a whole syndicate of investors around this one investor. And then the one investor decides not to, and the whole thing collapses. It poisons the whole well. And then you got to start over.
And that is why we ended up having to take this note during the pandemic. And you dilute yourself to having not controlled the company, or you shut the company down. So that's where you get to let's make the company bigger, so at least our small share is still bigger than what it would have been.
You guys are in a heavy R&D, just like we are. How many years out? I mean, when you're presenting to these investors, how many years out until you show them your cash flow positive, and then the miraculous bajillion dollars are rolling in?
Yeah, so we're probably not as far. So that's a really good question. I mean, we can be cash flow positive next year if we wanted to be.
Well, we had 1 month that we were cash flow positive last year, but then we scaled up and hired a bunch of people.
Right, right. We did have a month of, we
did have a month. We were like, oh my gosh, but we were cash flow positive this month.
Right, but realistically, we could, if we didn't want to grow. So we want to pour money on it to grow, right? And that's the thing. With your industry, you need a ton of money so you can start putting satellites into space. So you probably before you're generating revenue, you need a lot more, capital. And it's kind of like the pharmaceutical industry itself, where, you know, no capital, there's no revenue till you have a drug in the market, right? You know, so.
I think that's a hard part with investors too, is you don't know what they want. Some, in particular within strategic, some may be a public company that's investing in you and they can't see like a negative EBITDA on their sheets. So they're really concerned about like, let's just get you stable versus, you know, a private equity firm is going to come in and say, throw it on there and go fast. And then there's, you know, so it kind of depends on your investor too.
Right. Yeah. So we have a public company that's invested in us, and they don't want to see that negative EBITDA on their P&L. But right now, actually, we don't show up on their P&L yet, but we will soon.
So when you continue to scale, and as the two of you are discovering, you know, what your responsibilities should be, how did each of you determine, you know, what the areas that you should cover would be, you know, finance, legal, HR, and then the UX, kind of the customer experience? How did you, you know, find those niches and determine who should, you know, cover those areas?
I think we naturally sort of happened because I was really handling all the sales, all the demos, all the customers. So by virtue of that, I was handling the product and what we needed to build, and then the user experience, people saying, I don't like this. They sort of by virtue of just founder selling with sales, I was the customer facing person. And then Chuck took on,
I was trying to raise money,
all the investor stuff and all the raising money.
It was full time.
So then as part of that, like legal gets brought into there because we just told you how much our attorney makes, like from us, right? And then, you know, HR gets into there a little bit. The CFO has to go into there because he's doing all our projections now. So it's sort of naturally bucketed out that way. The only thing we changed was as these projects and the product became so much more complex, we had to pull sales and marketing out, and we put it over on Chuck's.
Right, but yeah, it just kind of just happened. You know, we said, oh, okay, you're doing that, I'm doing this, and this works out, and we're not arguing over it. There's no territory arguments, which is really good. Neither of us. I don't want what she does, but she doesn't want what I do. So.
I just have a quick question. So you were talking earlier about how you feel your competition is right behind you, but you're still staying on top of that. Do you guys have any like protections or anything to keep the top of the market, or?
We don't have any patents, if that's what you mean. No, the protections we have is our knowledge, and we're leaders right now. So our product is definitely world leading right now. The scary thing though is the competition, and we have and they came out of nowhere. So this competition was there, they're way out in the back. We heard about them now and then, but we weren't worried about them. And then they got bought out by a company that just raised $300 million, and they have more money and they bought this company because they were very cheap. They bought them, and now they got a ton of money, and they're kind of do what we do. And so that's scary. So all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, these guys are right there. Their booth at the trade show is bigger than ours.
Startup out of Europe. Right. They now have the backing.
Right.
I mean, if we sat on our hands and did nothing, it took us probably 2 years to go get to go into labs and stuff. Now they have more money. They can send more people out. This was me going to labs for 2 years. Like they send a whole army of people out to go do user experience and then aggregate the results.
Yeah, and all the marketing stuff. I mean, they just have but they're not where we are, and it takes time to build this thing. So, and we're partnering with a company that is actually now as big as them. So
maybe you can buy them.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of funny. What happened is we're partnering with a company, and we're just partnering with them as a sales partnership. And there was a big announcement. RockStep Solutions is working with Dotmatics. It was all over, blasted all over the internet and everything. And this company that competes with Dotmatics said, oh my God, they're partnering with RockStep Solutions, and they went and bought this other company. And so now it's still turning. Let me just say that.
And I know that, I think she's left, but one of the things that I would advise, if you're having to try to find those strategic investors, find people that are tangential in your industry that have successfully sold their company. Because now they want to invest in what they know. And so that was really successful for us. So like,
Oh, wow.
what is that?
Oh, I'm just saying, oh, wow, that's really insightful. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just, right. So like in that example, maybe there's some founders that sold, I don't know, cannabis software or something. And now what do they know? What do they want to de-risk? They know cannabis. So they're going to look for, it might not be in the edible space, but they understand what you're doing. So in our industry, kind of same thing, find people who have successfully sold their companies. And now what are they going to do with all this money? We found that to be really successful.
Well, guys,
All right.
it's 8 o'clock.
Yeah,
And this has been phenomenal.
All right.
I can't thank you enough.
Oh, I'm so
Would
glad.
you be open to being contacted if anybody has? other
Absolutely,
questions?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll leave
I
my
think we have
business
your
card.
contact,
Oh,
right?
I don't carry my business card.
I-
So
That's okay. I carry your business cards for you, Julie. Don't remember.